The transport shuttle descended through Vidia 3's amber atmosphere, and Cadet Jace Walker pressed her face against the cold viewport. Below, the city sprawled across floating platforms, connected by bridges that swayed like spider silk in the gentle winds. Everything about this world seemed designed for fragility. She had trained for this mission. 6 months of cultural protocols, language immersion, diplomatic history. The Zalari were a founding member of the Galactic Assembly, ancient, wise, and notoriously suspicious of new species. Earth had been trying to earn their trust for 40 standard years. Jace was the first human cadet permitted to visit their homeworld. Final approach, the pilot announced. Gravity at surface is 0.38 standard. Adjust your harness accordingly. She felt the familiar tug in her chest as the shuttle's artificial gravity shifted to match the planet's pull. Her joints loosened. Her muscles relaxed. She had spent her entire life on Earth, in gravity that would crush a Zalari into paste. Here, she felt like she was floating. The shuttle touched down on a landing platform made of woven crystal fibers. Through the viewport, Jace could see the welcoming committee. A dozen Zalari diplomats in ceremonial robes, their 6 limbs arranged in formal greeting positions. Their skin shifted through shades of deep green and copper as they pulsed with low-frequency communication. She gathered her pack and stepped to the airlock. The door hissed open. The atmosphere hit her first, thin, sweet, laced with unfamiliar pollen that made her nose twitch. She stepped onto the platform, keeping her movements measured and deliberate, just as her instructors had drilled into her. "Greetings," she said in careful Zalari, performing the traditional arm-crossing gesture. "I am Cadet Jace Walker, representing the United Earth Coalition. I come in peace and curiosity." The lead diplomat, a towering figure named Kalen, inclined his primary head. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Welcome, child of Earth. Your presence honors our world." But something flickered in those eyes. A hesitation. A fraction of a second where his skin flushed darker. Jace noticed. Her training had made her observant. She filed it away without reacting. The delegation escorted her across the platform toward a transit tube. Every surface was smooth, organic, designed for bodies that weighed almost nothing. The Zalari glided across the floor with barely a whisper of contact. Their feet barely seemed to touch the ground. Jace walked behind them, her boots making solid contact with each step. She kept her pace slow, her weight distributed evenly. She was aware, always aware, of how different she must appear. Taller, heavier, more solid. The transit tube carried them toward the diplomatic center, suspended between 2 floating platforms. Through the transparent walls, Jace watched the city move below. Zalari children played in open plazas, leaping between platforms with graceful arcs. Their bodies seemed to float, hanging in the air for impossible seconds. She remembered her briefing. The Zalari evolved on a world with minimal gravity. Their skeletons were hollow. Their muscles were designed for efficiency, not power. A human punch would shatter their bones. A human sprint would tear their joints apart. She had been warned. Never make sudden movements. Never lift anything too heavy. Never show what you can do. The diplomat Kalen turned to her, his skin pulsing with a pattern she had learned meant curiosity. "Cadet Walker, how do you find our world?" She smiled. "Beautiful. The architecture is remarkable. I've never seen buildings that seem to grow from the rock itself." "And the gravity, does it cause discomfort?" "No," she said. "It's pleasant, like walking on clouds." His eyes flickered, that hesitation again. "You adapt quickly," he said. "Many species require weeks to move without disorientation." "I train for many environments," she replied carefully. Kalen made a sound that might have been acknowledgement. He turned back to the view, but Jace caught his secondary head rotating slightly, watching her with those 2 smaller eyes mounted on the side. She was being observed, studied, weighed. That was expected. She was a stranger here, a representative of humanity's best intentions. But something else lurked beneath the surface. Something in the way the other diplomats positioned themselves around her, too far, too carefully. Something in the way the children in the plaza below had stopped playing, their 4 eyes fixed on the transit tube as it passed overhead. Jace pressed her palm against the window, waving at the children. They scattered, all of them. Parents gathered their young and retreated into the buildings. The transit tube continued its smooth journey, carrying Jace toward the diplomatic center, toward the heart of Xylari civilization, toward a world that had suddenly grown very, very quiet. She lowered her hand and turned to face forward. The diplomats ahead of her had frozen. Their skin rippled with agitation patterns she couldn't quite interpret. One of them made a high-pitched sound that cut off almost immediately. Kalen's primary head turned fully toward her. His 4 eyes were wide. The secondary head had retreated into his shoulders. "Cadet Walker," he said, and his voice was thin. "Please, do not make any abrupt gestures during your visit." She nodded, confused. "Of course, I apologize if I alarmed anyone." "You did not alarm them," Kalen said. "You terrified them." The transit tube arrived at the diplomatic center. The doors opened onto a vast hall filled with Xylari officials, all arranged in precise formations. Jace stepped through, and every eye in the room turned to her. She kept her hands at her sides, her steps measured, her expression calm. But she saw what they saw, a creature from a world of crushing gravity, a being capable of moving through their environment with impossible ease, a monster in the shape of a diplomat. She had trained for this, she had prepared for this. She had not prepared for the look of pure fear in the eyes of the Xylari official, who stepped forward to greet her. He was trembling. Military observer Tivar adjusted the magnification on his recording lenses. Through the high-security observation suite, he watched the human move through the diplomatic reception hall, and his primary heart hammered against his ribcage. He had studied the footage from Earth's first contact. He had read the assessments from the Xenological Institute. He had prepared himself for what a human might look like in person. But preparation meant nothing when faced with reality. The cadet, Jace Walker, moved through the room with the fluid grace of a predator. Every step was measured. Every gesture was controlled. Her body, so much larger than the Xylari around her, seemed to compress and expand with each breath. Muscles coiled beneath her skin like steel cables ready to snap. Tivar recorded everything. The way her eyes tracked movement. The way her head turned fractionally before her body followed. The way she positioned herself with clear sightlines to every exit. "Your assessment?" asked Commander Vex, appearing at Tivar's shoulder. Tivar's secondary head rotated to acknowledge his superior without taking his primary eyes from the human. "She is demonstrating significant restraint. Every action is calculated." "Calculated for what purpose?" "I cannot determine, but she is suppressing something. Her movements are too deliberate, too careful." Commander Vex made a sound of concern. The diplomats below report that she waved at children in the transit zone. The young fled in terror. "Wave," Tivar repeated. The word was unfamiliar, a human gesture. An open-handed motion meant to express greeting. That is what our cultural specialists believe. Tivar watched as the human accepted a cup of ceremonial nectar from a trembling diplomat. She lifted the cup with 2 fingers, only 2, and brought it to her lips. The cup was made of woven crystal, designed to fracture under sudden pressure. It did not fracture. "Her grip strength," Tivar murmured. "Look at the pressure points on the cup. There is no deformation. She is holding it with the same force required to hold a feather." "That is impossible," Vex said. "The cup requires specific pressure to remain intact. If she gripped too lightly, it would fall. Too tightly, it would shatter. There is a margin of error less than a fraction of a unit." Tivar's recording lenses zoomed in. She is maintaining exact pressure, perfect pressure. Her fingers are not trembling. There is no variation. Vex was silent for a long moment. Then, "Our finest warriors cannot hold those cups without cracking them. The margins are too precise." "Humanity's finest warriors are not here," Tivar said. "This is a cadet, a student, a youngling." The implications hung in the air between them. Below, the human set down the cup and stepped toward the center of the hall. She was moving to address the assembled diplomats. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft and measured. The translation system rendered her words into perfect Zalari. "I understand that my presence here may cause concern," she said. "I represent a species that is new to the galactic community. We have much to learn. We come with respect for your culture and your world." The diplomats watched her. Their skin pulsed with anxiety patterns. Several of them had retreated to the edges of the hall. Tivar noted the cadet's posture. Her weight was distributed evenly. Her hands remained visible at all times. Her eyes moved in a pattern that suggested she was counting the room's occupants. She was assessing threats. Even as she spoke of peace and respect, she was cataloging every being in the room, their positions, their distances, their potential to move. It was instinctual. She probably didn't even realize she was doing it. "Commander," Tivar said, "I recommend we increase security protocols. This cadet is." The human moved. It was not a fast movement. To Tivar's eyes, it appeared almost slow. But his instruments told a different story. His sensors recorded the motion as a blur of acceleration that should have been physically impossible in Zalari gravity. She had crossed the room in less than a second. 3 Zalari diplomats lay on the ground, crushed beneath a fallen structural element that had detached from the ceiling. The human stood above them, her arms extended, holding the massive weight with visible effort. Tivar's instruments screamed warnings. The structural element weighed more than a fully grown Zalari. In their gravity, it would have killed anyone it struck. The human held it. Her muscles strained against the load. Her face showed concentration but not fear. "Help them," she called out. "Someone help them." But no one moved. The diplomats who hadn't been struck were frozen. Their skin had gone pale with terror. Their limbs were locked in positions of fear. The human was holding an impossible weight. Her arms trembled. Her legs braced against the floor. Then she lifted. She actually lifted the structural element higher, clearing the pinned diplomats. She shifted her grip and threw it aside, sending it crashing into the far wall. Her chest was heaving. Her face was flushed with exertion. But she was standing. The diplomats on the floor were bleeding. Their hollow bones had been crushed by the falling structure. But they were alive, because the human had moved faster than any Zalari could have moved, had lifted more than any Zalari could have lifted, had saved them. Tivar watched the cadet kneel beside the injured diplomats. She was speaking to them, her voice calm and soothing. She was checking their wounds with hands that could have crushed them. And all around her, the assembled Zalari fled. They ran from the human who had saved their kin. They ran from the creature that could lift mountains. They ran from the superweapon that had just demonstrated its power. Tivar turned to Commander Vex. "Call the assembly. We need to make a report." Vex's skin had gone pale. "A report. We need to declare a state of emergency." The human was still kneeling in the center of the hall, surrounded by the wounded and the fleeing. She looked up at the observation suite, at the lenses that recorded her every move. And Tivar saw something in her eyes that terrified him more than her strength. Confusion. She didn't understand what she had done. She didn't understand why they were running. She thought she had helped them. She had no idea that she had just announced humanity's true nature to the galaxy. Jace watched the Zalari scatter like leaves in a storm. Her hands were slick with something that might have been blood, green and viscous, seeping from the wounds of the diplomats she had pulled from the wreckage. She pressed down on the worst injury, trying to stop the flow. The Zalari beneath her made a sound of pain, his skin pulsing with distress patterns. "Stay still," she said. "You're going to be okay, just stay still." But she didn't know if that was true. She didn't know anything about Zalari anatomy. She didn't know how much blood they could lose. She didn't know if her pressure was helping or hurting. She had only seen the beam falling, had only reacted, had only moved. Now she was alone in the center of a vast hall, surrounded by the wounded and the terrified. The other diplomats had fled. The security personnel had retreated. The observation lenses above her continued to record, their red lights blinking in rhythmic patterns. Jace looked up at one of the lenses. "I need help here, medical assistance, please." The lens didn't respond, didn't move, just recorded. She tried to keep her voice calm. "Someone, anyone, they're injured, they need medical attention." Nothing. The hall was silent except for the wounded Zalari's labored breathing and the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. She had trained for this. She had trained to remain calm in crisis. She had trained to think clearly when everything went wrong. But nothing in her training had prepared her for this. The structural beam she had thrown aside lay against the far wall, its base still smoking from the impact. She had lifted it. She had lifted something that must have weighed as much as a small vehicle. In low gravity, yes, but still, she had lifted it. And the Zalari had seen. She understood now, the fear in their eyes, the way they had positioned themselves too far away, the way they had watched her like she was something dangerous. They hadn't seen a diplomat, they had seen a weapon. "Jace Walker." The voice came from the entrance. A Zalari in formal military attire stood at the threshold, his primary head held high, his secondary head tucked close to his neck. His skin was a deep, commanding purple. She recognized the rank insignia, Commander. "I need medical assistance," she said. "Please, these people are hurt." The commander's eyes swept over the scene. "Our medical teams are on their way. You are to remain where you are." She nodded but didn't stop pressing on the wound. The Zalari beneath her had gone pale, his skin losing its vibrant color. "He's losing too much blood," she said. "I don't know how to." "Step away from him." Jace looked up. More Zalari had entered the hall. Military personnel, their limbs arranged in defensive postures. They carried weapons. She didn't recognize the design, but she recognized the intent. "You need to help him," she said. "I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just—" "You are a threat," the commander said. "Step away from the wounded, now." She lifted her hands slowly. Blood, green blood, dripped from her fingers. "I'm not a threat, I was trying to help. They were about to be crushed and I—" "Step away." She stepped back. The Zalari beneath her made a sound of distress as her pressure lifted. Blood continued to flow from his wound. The medical teams rushed past her, their limbs moving in practiced precision. They surrounded the wounded diplomats, their instruments glowing with diagnostic lights. Jace stood in the center of the hall, her hands raised, blood dripping onto the polished floor. "Commander," she said, "I want to make it clear, I was trying to help. I wasn't doing anything aggressive, I was." "The structural element was in motion for less than 1 second, the commander said. "You crossed the hall and caught it before it struck the ground. That acceleration is impossible for any known biological form." "It's not impossible," she said. "It's just what my body does. In low gravity I can move faster, it's physics." The commander's secondary head rotated to study her from a different angle. "You call this physics. We call it a demonstration of military capability." She shook her head. "I'm not military, I'm a cadet. I'm studying diplomacy. I'm here to learn about your culture, not to—" "You are a predator," the commander said. "You are a creature from a world that would crush us. You have moved in ways that should be impossible. You have lifted weight that would kill our strongest warriors. And you did it without effort. It wasn't without effort, she said. I was straining, I was. You did not break a sweat. She looked down at herself. Her uniform was damp with Salari blood, but her body was dry. Her breathing was already returning to normal. She hadn't broken a sweat. How could she explain? How could she make them understand? On Earth, she had trained in gravity that was almost 3 times what they experienced. Every morning, she ran distances that would have killed them. Every afternoon, she lifted weights that would have crushed them. Every evening, she practiced movements designed to control the power of her own muscles. She had spent her entire life learning to be gentle, to hold back, to never show what she could really do. And in one moment of instinct, she had shattered every carefully constructed illusion. Commander, she said, you need to understand. What you saw, that's normal. For my species, that's normal. We're not superweapons, we're just humans. The commander's eyes narrowed. You expect us to believe that your entire species is capable of this? My entire species is capable of more, she said. I'm not even an athlete. I'm not a soldier. I'm a student. There are humans who could lift 10 times what I lifted. There are humans who could run faster and jump higher, and they would still consider themselves ordinary. The hall fell silent. She had said too much. She could see it in their eyes. She had confirmed their worst fears. We need to contact Earth, Jace said. Please, let me contact my people. They'll explain everything. The assembly has been notified, the commander said. You will be confined to your quarters until further notice. You will not contact anyone. You will not move. You will wait. Jace's heart sank. I can explain, I can make you understand. It's not what you think, we're not. You will wait, the commander repeated. And while you wait, we will determine what to do with your weapon species. The Galactic Assembly convened in emergency session. Tivar stood at the observation deck of his command ship, watching the feed from the assembly chamber. 73 species had gathered, 73 delegations, 73 voices raised in fear, accusation, and demands for action. The human sat alone in the center of the chamber, surrounded by ambassadors from species who had never seen a human in person, surrounded by beings who had only heard the reports, the footage, the impossible acceleration, the crushing strength, the casual display of power. Jace Walker wore her formal cadet uniform. Her hands were on the table in front of her, palms down. Her face was expressionless. She was terrified. Tivar could see it in her eyes, but she was holding herself together. This is the creature you brought among us, demanded the ambassador from the Cathari. This is the species you told us was peaceful. The human ambassador, a tall male named Ortega, stood to address the assembly. Ambassador Viken, humanity has always acted in good faith. We have been members of the assembly for 80 years without incident. Our representative. She saved lives, another ambassador interrupted. She lifted a structural element that should have killed her. She moved faster than any biological being should be able to move. She demonstrated capabilities that are indistinguishable from a superweapon. She was trying to help, Ortega said. That's what we do. When we see people in danger, we help. It's not a threat display. It's who we are. Who you are, the Cathari ambassador said, is a species of predators. Your world's gravity is crushing. Your physical capabilities are terrifying. You evolved to kill, and you have hidden this from us for 8 decades. Tivar watched Ortega's face. The human was holding his anger in check. Tivar could see the muscles in his jaw working, could see the tension in his shoulders. We have hidden nothing, Ortega said. We have simply not mentioned certain things, because we didn't think they were relevant, because we didn't want to cause exactly this reaction. 8 decades, the ambassador from the Varath said. 8 decades of pretending to be weak. 8 decades of diplomatic engagement while you cultivated your military capability. We're not military, Ortega said. We're not pretending we're. Your cadet lifted a structural element that weighs more than a transport vehicle. She moved across a room in less than a second. She displayed physical capacity that our strongest warriors cannot match. And you tell us you are not military. Ortega was silent for a moment. Then, Cadet Walker, please stand. Jace rose from her seat. Her movements were measured, controlled. She looked out over the assembly of aliens, and Tivar saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. Resolve. Ambassadors, she said, I understand your fear, I do. If I saw what you saw, I would be afraid too, but I need you to understand something. What I did wasn't special. It wasn't a demonstration of anything, it was just what my body does. In your gravity, I'm faster. In your gravity, I'm stronger. It's not a weapon, it's physics. The assembly burst into chaos. Physics? She calls this physics. She's mocking us. The Cathari ambassador raised his voice above the others. You expect us to believe that your species is simply built differently, that your entire population walks around with capabilities that would make us terrified. Jace met his gaze. Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you, and I need you to understand that we know what we are, we've always known, and we've spent our entire history learning to control it, to hold back, to be gentle. Every human in this room has been trained since childhood to never use their full strength, to never show what they can do, because we know how it looks, we know how it feels, and we don't want to be feared. The assembly was quiet. But Tivar could see it in their eyes. The fear wasn't gone, it had just transformed. You call this control, the Cathari ambassador said. You call this gentleness, but you were not asked. You assumed. You decided what was best for us. You decided to hide. You decided to lie. We didn't lie, Jace said. We just didn't think it mattered. We thought you would see who we are, not what we can do. We thought. You thought wrong, the ambassador said. And now we must decide what to do with you, with your entire species. The assembly exploded again. The Cathari ambassador raised his hand for silence. We have a motion before us. The quarantine of Earth, the removal of humanity from the Galactic Assembly, the classification of your species as a threat to galactic security. Jace's face went pale. You can't do that. We haven't done anything. We've been peaceful members of the Assembly for 8 decades. We've contributed. We've helped. You have been hiding, the ambassador said. You have been concealing your true nature. You have been waiting. Waiting for what? No one answered. Tivar watched the human's face. He watched the fear there, the confusion, the desperate need to explain. But he also saw something else, something that made his secondary heart skip a beat. He saw the human's fists clench. He saw her jaw tighten. He saw the muscles in her shoulders flex. She was holding herself back. She wanted to fight. She wanted to run. She wanted to do something. But she was holding, just barely. And Tivar realized that if she snapped, if she decided to stop holding back, nothing in that chamber would survive. Jace felt her control slipping. The voices were a roar in her ears. The alien faces were a blur of terror and accusation. She was surrounded, boxed in, trapped in a room full of beings who saw her as a monster. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to show them exactly what a human could do. But she didn't, she held. Ambassadors, she said, and her voice was steady despite everything, please. I'm asking you to listen. I'm asking you to see what we really are. The Cathari ambassador shook his head. We have seen enough. No, she said. You've seen a fraction, a single moment. You've seen what I can do in your gravity with your fragile bones and your hollow bodies, but you haven't seen what we really are. You haven't seen our world. She raised her hand, and every being in the room flinched. But she was pointing at the display screen at the front of the chamber, at the holographic map that showed Earth in relation to the rest of the galaxy. Let me show you, she said. Please, just let me show you. Ortega nodded. Ambassador Kalen, I request permission for my representative to present a full briefing on humanity's capabilities. This is not a threat display. This is context. You need to understand what we really are. The Zalari ambassador looked at Jace. His skin pulsed with agitation. Show us, he said, and then we will decide. Jace moved to the display console. Her fingers found the controls, and the image of Earth expanded to fill the screen. Earth, she said, our homeworld. Gravity is 3 times what you experience here. Atmospheric pressure is significant. Temperatures range from freezing to boiling. We evolved in an environment that would kill most of the species in this room. She pulled up images, mountains that towered to the sky, oceans that stretched to the horizon, storms that could level cities. This is what we survived, she said. This is what made us what we are. We didn't evolve to be weapons. We evolved to survive. Every muscle in our bodies exists because our ancestors needed to escape predators. Every bone in our skeletons exists because our ancestors needed to survive falls. Every instinct we have exists because our ancestors needed to live. The assembly watched in silence. The physical capabilities you've seen are not military in nature. They are survival traits. We don't train to do what I did. We just do it, because our bodies are built for a world that would crush you. She pulled up a new image, a human woman lifting a massive stone block. This is how we build. This is how we work. This is how we live. We use our strength not to destroy, but to create. Every city on Earth was built by hands like mine. Every bridge, every building, every structure. We make things because we can. The Cathari ambassador was watching the images. His face was unreadable. You make things, he said. You build and you also destroy, you fight, you kill. Your history is full of war. Yes, Jace said. We have fought, we have killed. We have done terrible things, but we have also learned, we have grown. We have decided again and again to be better than what we were. That's what we really are, not weapons, not monsters. Survivors who chose to be more. The ambassador was silent for a long moment. Then, you expect us to believe that a species with this capacity has simply chosen to be peaceful. I expect you to believe it because it's true, Jace said. Look at our history. We had nuclear weapons 100 years before we reached space. We could have destroyed ourselves. We came close, but we pulled back. We created agreements. We built safeguards. And then we reached for the stars not as warriors but as explorers. She pulled up the images of first contact, of the first human ship arriving at a distant world, of the first ambassador shaking hands with an alien being. We wanted to meet you, she said. We wanted to learn from you. We wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves. That's why we're here, not to conquer, not to threaten, but to be part of the community. The assembly was still silent, but something had shifted. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it had been joined by something else. Curiosity. Ambassador Kalen, Jace said, you saw me save your people. You saw me lift that beam. What did I do afterward? Kalen's skin pulsed. You knelt, you helped, you tried to stop the bleeding. Yes, she said, because that's what we do. We don't see weakness and think prey. We see weakness and think help. We don't see fragility and think opportunity. We see fragility and think protection. That's what you need to understand about us. We're strong, but we use that strength to protect, not to destroy. The Cathari ambassador stepped forward. You speak of protection, but how do we know you won't change your mind? How do we know you won't decide that the galaxy is yours for the taking? Jace looked at him. Her eyes were steady. Because we had the chance before, she said. When we first reached space, we could have come as conquerors. We could have used our strength to take what we wanted, but we didn't. We came with open hands, and in 80 years of membership in this assembly, we have never threatened anyone. We have never attacked. We have never even raised our voices in anger. She spread her arms wide. If we were what you think we are, don't you think we would have shown it by now? Don't you think we would have taken what we wanted? No one answered. Look at us, Jace said. Really look at us. We're not a military force. We're a diplomatic mission. We're students and scholars and ambassadors. We're not hiding our strength because we're waiting for something. We're hiding it because we don't want to be feared, because being feared would mean being alone. And being alone is the one thing we can't survive. The assembly was silent. But Jace could see it in their eyes. The fear was still there. It would always be there. But it was mixed now with something else. Hoping. Maybe that was enough. Ambassador Ortega stepped forward. Ambassadors, I'm going to ask something difficult, but I need you to hear it. Humanity has been a member of the Assembly for 80 years. In that time, have we ever violated a treaty? Have we ever attacked another species? Have we ever done anything but contribute? The Cathari ambassador's eyes flickered. No. Have we ever threatened anyone, demanded anything, used our strength to coerce? Objectively, no. Then why, Ortega said, are we being treated like enemies? Because of what we might do, because of what we could be. We've spent 80 years proving who we are. 80 years of cooperation, contribution, partnership. And one moment of instinctual heroism is enough to erase all of that. The assembly was quiet. Jace watched the ambassadors' faces. She watched their skin patterns, their eye movements, their subtle gestures. They were thinking. They were actually thinking. The Cathari ambassador looked at Jace. Your cadet, she lifted the beam. She saved lives, but you admitted yourself that you trained her. You trained her to control her strength, to hold back, to never show what she can do. Why? Ortega paused. Because we know what it looks like. We know how it feels to be on the other side. We know that our strength can be terrifying. We train our people to be gentle because gentleness is the only way to live with what we are. You train your people to lie. We train our people to be kind, Jace said. There's a difference. She stepped forward, away from the console, toward the center of the chamber. Ambassadors, I need you to understand something. I was raised to be careful, to never use more than a fraction of my strength, to never accidentally hurt someone, to always be aware of the fragility of others. That's not a deception. That's not a lie. That's the most honest thing about us. We know what we are, and we choose to be more. The Cathari ambassador was watching her. His eyes were hard. You choose to be more, he said. But what if one day you choose not to? What if one day you decide that your strength is the only thing that matters? What if one day you decide to take what you want? Then you would fight us, Jace said, and you would lose. The assembly gasped. Jace continued. You would lose because you couldn't stop us. You would lose because we would fight back with everything we have. And you know what would happen next. She looked around the room. We would be alone, forever. No one would ever trust us again. No one would ever work with us. No one would ever see us as anything but a threat. And that's the thing about being strong. You can take whatever you want, but you can't make anyone love you. The Cathari ambassador was silent. We don't want to be feared, Jace said. We want to be understood. We want to be accepted. We want to be part of this community. And we're willing to prove it, every day, for as long as it takes. But you need to give us a chance. You need to see beyond what we can do and see who we are. The assembly was silent. Then slowly, Ambassador Kalen rose from his seat. Cadet Walker has a point, he said. Humanity has been a peaceful member of this assembly for 80 years. They have contributed. They have helped. They have never threatened anyone. And in the moment when they could have done something terrible, they did something good. He looked at Jace. You saved my people, he said. I know it looked terrifying. I know it felt terrifying. But the fact is, you saved them. You didn't have to. You could have let them die. You could have used the moment to demonstrate your power and demand submission. But you didn't. You helped. Jace nodded. That's what we do. We help. Show me, Kalen said. Show me what you really are. Not in a display, not in a demonstration. Show me that you're not what I fear. Show me that you're what I hope." Jace looked at him, then she smiled. "I can do that," she said, "but you have to be willing to see." She turned to the display console and brought up an image, a picture of Earth from orbit, blue and green and white. "This is my world," she said. "This is my home, and I will do anything to protect it, but I will also do anything to make sure I never have to." She looked out over the assembly. "Because that's who we are. Not warriors, not weapons, not super soldiers, just people. People who have been through hell and come out the other side. People who know what it's like to be afraid and choose to be brave anyway. People who understand that strength isn't about what you can do, it's about what you choose not to do." The assembly was silent. And then slowly, the Cathari ambassador sat down. "Show us," he said. "Show us what you really are." Jace nodded, and she began to tell them the story of humanity. The story of a species that had clawed its way from the dirt to the stars, that had survived fires and floods and wars and plagues, that had built cities and torn them down and built them again, that had fought and killed and loved and built. The story of a species that had learned, through pain and suffering and loss, that the only thing that mattered was connection. The story of a species that could have conquered the galaxy and chose not to. The story of humanity. The hours stretched on. Jace told them everything. The wars, the peace, the leaders who had risen, the villains who had fallen, the moments of triumph and the moments of despair. She told them about the scientists who had cured diseases, the artists who had captured beauty, the workers who had built wonders. She told them about the people who had held the door for strangers, the people who had fed the hungry, the people who had loved without condition. She told them what it meant to be human. And when she was done, the assembly was silent. "Ambassadors," she said, "I know this is hard, I know it's frightening. I know that seeing what we are makes you want to run, but I'm asking you to stay. I'm asking you to see us, not as a threat, not as a weapon, as what we are, people just like you." The Cathari ambassador was watching her. His eyes had softened. "You speak of connection," he said. "You speak of community, but how do we know you mean it?" "Because I'm offering you a choice," Jace said. "I'm offering you the choice to see me, to know me, to trust me. And if you can't do that, then we'll go. We'll leave the assembly. We'll go back to Earth. And we'll never bother you again." Ortega's head snapped around. "Cadet Walker, you cannot make that offer." "I can," she said. "And I am, because we can't live like this. We can't live in a galaxy that sees us as monsters. We can't spend our lives hiding what we are. If you can't accept us for who we are, then we'll find another way. We'll find a new home. We'll build a new community." She looked at the ambassadors. "But I don't think that's what you want. I don't think any of you want to push us away. I think you want to understand. I think you want to see what we really are. And I think you're afraid. But I'm asking you not to let that fear control you. I'm asking you to choose." The assembly was silent. Then Ambassador Kalen rose from his seat. "I believe her," he said. "I saw what she did. I saw her save my people. I saw her kneel in the blood of those she had saved. I saw her try to heal them. That was not the act of a monster. That was the act of someone who cares." He looked at Jace. "I choose to believe." The Cathari ambassador rose next. "I have watched this species for 80 years, he said. "I have watched them build. I have watched them help. I have watched them become part of our community. And I have never in all that time seen them do anything to justify my fear. That fear is my own, and I'm done carrying it." He looked at Jace. "I choose to believe." One by one, the ambassadors rose. One by one, they declared their trust. Jace stood in the center of the chamber. Her eyes were wet. Her hands were shaking. She had done it. She had actually done it. But then the Vareth ambassador rose. His skin was pale. His eyes were hard. "I choose not to believe," he said. "I see what you are. I see the danger you represent. and I will not allow my people to be threatened by a species that could crush us at any moment. The assembly shifted, tension returned. I'm not asking you to trust me, Jace said. I'm asking you to see me, to know me, to give me a chance. Your species has had 80 years. You've had your chance. Then give me more time, she said. Give me another 80 years. And if, in all that time, we have done nothing but help, then maybe you'll see, maybe you'll understand. The ambassador was silent. Jace could see the war in his eyes, the fear against the hope, the suspicion against the desire to believe. And then slowly he sat down. I will give you another 80 years, he said, but I will be watching. Jace nodded. That's all I ask. The assembly erupted into applause, not a cheering applause, a solemn applause, a recognition that something had changed, that something was different. Jace looked out over the gathered beings. She saw the fear in their eyes, the hope, the confusion. She saw a galaxy that was trying to learn to trust. And she saw a future that was possible. Jace returned to Earth. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere, through the clouds, through the sky, and then she saw it, her home, her world, the place where she had been born and raised and trained. She had changed, the galaxy had changed, and she wasn't sure what came next. But she knew one thing, she had done something right. The shuttle touched down, the airlock opened, and she stepped out onto Earth's surface. The gravity hit her, heavy, crushing, familiar. She took a deep breath and walked to the reception area. Ortega was waiting for her, the human ambassador. You did well, he said. The assembly is still uncertain, but you opened a door, you gave them a choice. Will they take it? I don't know, but it's a start. Jace nodded. She looked up at the sky, at the stars that were still so far away. Ortega, she said, what happens next? We proved we could be good. We proved we could be trusted. But what happens when we make a mistake? What happens when we lose control? I don't know, he said. But I know one thing, we have to try, we have to keep trying, because that's who we are. Jace smiled. That's who we are. She walked out of the reception area and into the light. The sun was warm on her face. The air was sweet. She was home. The stars were still far away. The galaxy was still uncertain. The future was still unknown. But Jace Walker, human cadet, knew one thing. She would try. Every day, for the rest of her life, she would try to be the best version of herself, the version that saved people, the version that helped, the version that chose to be good. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. She looked up at the stars. She thought about the aliens who had learned to trust, the beings who had learned to see beyond fear, the galaxy that was trying to understand. She thought about what came next. And she smiled. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't know what was going to happen. And that was okay, because she knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't a superweapon. Humanity wasn't a threat. Humanity was just trying to be good. And that was enough. The years passed. Jace Walker became an ambassador, then a diplomat, then an advisor to the Galactic Assembly. She spent her life building bridges between species, creating understanding, fostering trust. She never forgot her first visit to Vidia 3. She never forgot the look of fear in the Zalari's eyes. She never forgot the moment she chose to be good. And she never stopped trying. The galaxy changed, humanity changed, the fear faded, the trust grew, the connection deepened. And one day, Jace Walker looked out at the stars and saw something she had never expected to see. A galaxy that had accepted her. A galaxy that had seen beyond what she could do and seen who she was. A galaxy that had learned to trust. She smiled. And she realized that the greatest superweapon humanity possessed wasn't its strength. It wasn't its power. It wasn't its capability. It was its ability to choose. Every day, every hour, every moment. To choose kindness over cruelty. To choose trust over fear. to choose connection over isolation, to choose to be good. And that choice had changed everything. Jace Walker walked out onto the balcony of her apartment on Earth. The stars glittered above her. The wind whispered through the trees. The world was peaceful. She thought about the Zalari, about the Cathari, about all the beings she had met. She thought about the moment she had lifted that beam, the moment she had saved those lives, the moment she had shown them what humanity really was. She had been afraid then, confused, uncertain. But she had chosen to be good. And that choice had made all the difference. She looked up at the stars one last time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving us a chance." The stars glittered back at her. And somewhere far away, on a low-gravity planet called Vidia 3, a Zalari child looked up at the sky and saw a shooting star. He smiled. He had heard the stories about the human who had saved his people, about the species that had chosen to be good, about the galaxy that had learned to trust. He didn't understand all of it. He was just a child. But he understood one thing. Strength was not the measure of a species. The measure was how they used it. And humanity had used theirs to build. The child smiled. And he thought about the future. A future where fear was replaced by understanding, where suspicion was replaced by trust, where the galaxy was a place of hope. A future made possible by one human's choice. One choice that had changed everything. The child looked up at the stars. And he dreamed.